In the year 2024, the average person living in a major city is already captured on camera more than 300 times every single day. By 2033, however, this number will have become entirely irrelevant. It will be a quaint artifact of a bygone era, because the very nature of being observed will have fundamentally changed. The tracking will no longer be a series of discrete events recorded by external devices. It will be a constant, ambient, and increasingly internal state of being. Is this idea of privacy, the right to a space unseen, and a thought unrecorded, a fundamental human need essential for a healthy mind and society? Or is it merely a temporary historical luxury, an accidental byproduct of a specific period of urbanization and industrialization that is now coming to its natural end? Over the course of our journey together, we will explore the precise technological, social, and economic pathways that are converging to create a world where privacy, as we have known it for the last few centuries, becomes a practical and conceptual impossibility. We will see how this future isn't being built by a shadowy cabal, but by us, through a series of small, rational, and often desirable choices that collectively lead to a world without secrets. This profound shift is not unfolding like a sudden storm, but more like a gradual change in the climate. It's an atmospheric alteration, happening so slowly and pervasively that we barely notice the pressure changing. The foundation for this world is being laid with every convenient tap of a digital wallet, every seamless unlocking of a phone with our face, every smart device that learns our habits to better serve us. Each of these actions is a single, logical transaction, a small portion of our private data exchanged for a measure of convenience, security, or efficiency. The problem is not with any single transaction, but with the cumulative effect of trillions of them, creating a vast, interconnected digital ledger of human life that is becoming more detailed and predictive with each passing second. The concept of 2033 as a tipping point is not arbitrary. It represents a convergence of several critical technological and social vectors. First, there is the maturation of global network infrastructure. The rollout of 5G was only the beginning. By the early 2030s, 6G and advanced satellite constellations will provide the planetary bandwidth necessary to support trillions of interconnected sensors, all streaming data in real time. This is the nervous system of the transparent world. Second, artificial intelligence will have moved beyond its current stage of recognizing patterns in existing data to a state of constant, predictive analysis of live data streams. The same AI that can now write a poem or generate an image will be focused on the far more complex data set of society itself, interpreting the movements, transactions, and even the biometrics of billions of people to identify trends, anomalies, and potential futures. And third, this period marks the likely crossover point where technologies like central bank digital currencies and biometric identification systems cease to be optional alternatives and become the default, foundational layer of our economic and civil infrastructure. When your identity is your face and your money is a programmable token on a government ledger, the architecture for total transparency is no longer a future projection. It is the established reality. To truly grasp the magnitude of this change, we must understand the qualitative difference between the surveillance of the past and the awareness of the near future. A traditional CCTV camera, for instance, is a passive tool. It records what happens in front of it, creating a record that must be manually reviewed. It is a tool for looking into the past. The AI integrated sensor network of 2030 is an active, cognitive system. It doesn't just record, it perceives. It doesn't just see a crowd, it sees individuals within it, cross-referencing their faces with digital identities, analyzing their gait for signs of distress or aggression, and even listening to the ambient conversation to gauge the mood of a public square. This network isn't looking at the past. It is attempting to model the present and predict the immediate future. This is the crucial leap from data collection to ambient intelligence. The system's goal is not merely to know what you did, but to understand what you are doing, and ultimately to calculate what you are most likely to do next. The internal tracking mentioned at the outset points toward the final frontier of this process, the integration of biometric and neurological data. It begins innocuously with smartwatches that monitor our heart rate and sleep patterns for health benefits. It progresses to wearables that can infer our emotional state from subtle physiological cues. And it culminates in the mainstream adoption of non-invasive and eventually invasive brain-computer interfaces. These devices, initially developed for medical purposes, to help the paralyzed communicate, for instance, will inevitably be marketed as the ultimate consumer wellness and productivity tools. They will offer the promise of controlling devices with a thought, of monitoring our focus, and perhaps even of sharing experiences directly, mind to mind. But in doing so, they will generate the most intimate data stream imaginable, the raw electrical signals of our inner world. We are standing at a unique precipice in history. The technologies that will define the post-privacy era are not speculative science fiction. They are already present in our labs, in our markets, and in some cases, already in our homes. The path from here to 2033 is not one of radical invention, but of relentless integration and scale. It is the story of how existing tools are being woven together into a single, cohesive fabric of awareness that will soon envelop everything. The fundamental challenge, therefore, is not technological, but philosophical. As the very idea of a private self dissolves, what new form of identity will emerge in its place? Before we can answer that, we must first understand where the idea of privacy even came from, and why its brief, bright existence may have been an exception, not the rule, in the long story of humanity. We are, perhaps, the last generation to remember a world defined by the walls between our inner lives and the outer world, and the story of how those walls crumble is the story of our immediate future. To understand the world without privacy that awaits us, we must first recognize that the very concept of privacy is not an ancient, timeless human right. It is a modern invention, a psychological and social construct born of a very specific set of historical circumstances. For the vast majority of human history, from the hunter-gatherer clan to the medieval village, the idea of a private life would have been incomprehensible. In a small, tight-knit community, everything was communal knowledge. Your work, your relationships, your arguments, your finances, your beliefs. These were not secrets held within the sanctuary of a private mind, but were instead the shared fabric of social reality. Survival itself depended on this transparency. The village was a self-regulating organism, and its currency was reputation, built on a lifetime of public actions. Anonymity was not a freedom. It was a terrifying state of exile. This reality was reflected in the very architecture of life. Homes were often single, open rooms. The concept of personal space was minimal. You were always seen, always known, always accountable to the collective. The Great Shift began with the Industrial Revolution and the subsequent explosion of urbanization. As millions moved from the predictable, interconnected life of the village to the chaotic anonymity of the city, they experienced something entirely new. They were surrounded by strangers. For the first time in human history, you could live your life largely unobserved by people who knew your past. This newfound anonymity was both liberating and terrifying. It created the space for individualism, for reinvention, for the exploration of ideas and identities that would have been suppressed in the village. It was in this anonymous urban crucible that the modern notion of privacy was forged. Architecture evolved to reflect this new value. Houses were divided into separate rooms with specific functions. Hallways were invented to allow movement without disturbing others. And most importantly, doors were fitted with locks. The lock is the fundamental technology of privacy. It is the physical manifestation of a boundary between the public world and the private self. A new social contract emerged. Your home was your castle, a sovereign space where you were free from the gaze of society. Your thoughts were your own. This was the golden age of privacy, a brief historical moment, perhaps only a century and a half long, where the technology of observation was outpaced by the scale of society. But this new creation was fragile, and almost as soon as it was established, we began to trade it away, piece by piece, in a series of bargains that seemed entirely reasonable at the time. The 20th century bargain was a simple one: exchange a small slice of privacy for a significant increase in convenience or security. It began subtly. The telephone created a record of who you called and when. The credit card, introduced by Diners Club in 1950, transformed anonymous cash transactions into a traceable digital record held by a bank. We accepted this because the convenience of not carrying cash was immense. Then came store loyalty cards, which offered us discounts in exchange for a detailed record of our consumption habits. We gave up a piece of our consumer privacy for a few cents off our groceries. Each step was logical, the trade-off clear and seemingly minor. The true acceleration, however, arrived with the popularization of the internet and social media in the early 21st century. Here, the bargain became much more explicit. Companies like Google and Facebook offered us incredible services: instant access to all information, global connection with friends and family, for what seemed like no cost. The actual price, of course, was our personal data. We willingly documented our lives, our relationships, our political views, our emotional states, and our locations, creating the most comprehensive database of human behavior ever assembled. We traded our privacy not just for convenience, but for connection, for validation, for a sense of belonging in a new digital tribe. We became the villagers again. But this time the village was global, and the village elder was an algorithm. This slow, voluntary erosion set the stage for the final turning point: the global pandemic of the early 2020s. This event did for surveillance what World War II did for industrial production. It was a catalyst that compressed decades of social change into a few short years. Under the unassailable logic of public health and safety, practices that would have been considered dystopian just months earlier became normalized. Governments rolled out contact tracing apps that monitored our proximity to others. We checked into restaurants and shops using QR codes, creating a granular record of our movements. vaccine passports became a requirement for travel and public life, linking our medical status directly to our civil liberties. Simultaneously, the massive shift to remote work dissolved the last physical boundary between our professional and private lives. Companies installed monitoring software on laptops, tracking keystrokes, taking screenshots, and even monitoring webcams to ensure productivity. The home, once the castle of privacy, became just another node in the corporate network, its sanctity breached by the demands of the digital workplace. The pandemic served as a global psychological conditioning event. It taught a generation that individual privacy is subordinate to collective well-being. It accustomed us to the idea that our personal data, our location, our health, our associations, is a public resource to be deployed in a crisis. The infrastructure of tracking, once built for a temporary emergency, was never fully dismantled. The social acceptance of it lingered. The argument had been won. In the eternal battle between security and liberty, a critical global precedent had been set. The desire for absolute privacy, once seen as a right, was subtly reframed as a selfish, even dangerous, antisocial preference. This is the foundation upon which the world of 2033 is being built, not on a sudden totalitarian seizure of power, but on a century of small, rational bargains and one profound, world-altering crisis that permanently tilted the scales. The social acceptance of diminished privacy, cultivated over decades and solidified by the pandemic, provides the fertile ground. But the seeds of the truly transparent society are technological. By 2033, the end of privacy will not be a policy choice, but a technical reality, the inevitable result of a powerful convergence of three distinct streams of technology: ubiquitous sensors, default biometric identity, and a globally integrated network. It is this technological stack, the all-seeing network, that will form the immutable architecture of the post-privacy world. The first layer of this stack is the exponential proliferation of sensors. We currently think of surveillance in terms of cameras, but this is a deeply outdated model. By the late 2020s, the sensor network will be far more diverse and pervasive. It will include not just high-definition AI-powered cameras on every street corner, in every store, and integrated into every new vehicle, but a whole ecosystem of other data-gathering devices. Drones, both autonomous and human-piloted, will provide persistent aerial oversight, their data streams analyzed in real time. Fleets of satellites, like those launched by companies such as Planet Labs and Maxar, already provide daily, and in some cases, hourly, imagery of the entire Earth's surface, capable of tracking changes as small as a single vehicle. Microphones equipped with sophisticated natural language processing will be capable of monitoring the ambient soundscape of a city, flagging keywords or shifts in aggregate vocal tones that might indicate a public disturbance. LiDAR sensors in autonomous vehicles and smart city infrastructure will be constantly mapping the physical world in 3 dimensions, creating a dynamic, real-time digital twin of our environment. The key innovation is not the sensors themselves, but their fusion. Powerful AI platforms, developed by companies like Palantir Technologies for intelligence agencies and now being commercialized for civic and corporate use, are designed to ingest these trillions of disparate data points and weave them into a single, coherent, and searchable narrative of reality. The system will be able to follow an individual not just by switching from one camera to the next, but by seamlessly transitioning between a street-level camera, a drone overhead, their car's GPS, their credit card transaction, and the satellite image of their destination. This creates a continuous, unbroken thread of location and activity data for every individual in a monitored space. The concept of disappearing from this network becomes a technical impossibility. The second, and perhaps most critical layer, is the shift to biometric identity as the default. The era of carrying keys, passwords, and plastic identification cards is rapidly coming to a close. It is being replaced by a system where your body is your credential. Facial recognition is the most obvious example. It is already being used for everything from unlocking your phone to boarding an airplane. By 2030, it will be the standard for accessing buildings, making payments, and interacting with government services. But it's not just about faces. Gait analysis algorithms can identify you from a distance simply by the unique way you walk. Voice print technology will authenticate your identity over the phone or when speaking to a home assistant. Even the unique pattern of veins in your hand or the geometry of your ear can be used as an infallible biometric marker. This transition is being driven by the irresistible allure of seamless convenience and enhanced security. No more forgotten passwords, no more lost keys, no more stolen credit cards. The trade-off is the complete eradication of public anonymity. In a world of default biometric identification, to be in a public or semi-public space is to be known. Your presence is automatically logged, your identity confirmed, and your movements cross-referenced with your digital profile. Walking down the street will be functionally equivalent to logging into a website. You are authenticated at every step. This makes true dissent or protest profoundly risky, as every participant's identity is instantly and irrefutably known to the system. The final layer that ties everything together is the global network itself. The deployment of smart city infrastructure, which began in cities like Singapore, Dubai, and many municipalities in China, will become a global standard. This infrastructure is the physical housing for the all-seeing network. Lampposts will not just contain lights, but will be packed with 5G and 6G transceivers, cameras, microphones, and environmental sensors. Roads will have embedded sensors that track traffic flow and identify individual vehicles by their electronic signatures. Public transportation systems will be fully integrated with the biometric identity grid. This is not a distant vision. Projects are underway across the globe. By 2025, a significant portion of major urban centers will have the foundational layers of this grid in place. By 2030, these individual smart cities will begin to be networked together, sharing data and protocols to create regional and then continental surveillance grids. The timeline is accelerated by economic and geopolitical competition. Nations are racing to become leaders in AI and smart infrastructure, viewing it as a source of national power and economic advantage. The companies that build this infrastructure, like Hikvision in China, or the various tech giants in the West, will be exporting not just technology, but a model of governance. Consider the practical reality of this convergence by 2033. An individual leaves their apartment, their face unlocking the door. Their movement is logged. As they walk down the street, their gait is analyzed and cross-referenced by the smart lampposts. They purchase a coffee, paying with a facial scan, linking their location to a financial transaction. They board a train, passing through a biometric gate. Their conversation on the train is captured by ambient audio sensors and transcribed, flagged for keywords related to a protest planned for that afternoon. The system, having identified them as a potential participant, might subtly alter their digital experience. Perhaps the news feed on their phone starts showing articles about the negative consequences of public disorder, or their digital assistant might suggest an alternative, more pleasant activity for the afternoon. This is not the brute force of an oppressive soldier on the street. It is the subtle, pervasive, and irresistibly efficient logic of a fully integrated cognitive network. It is a system designed not just to watch, but to understand, to predict, and ultimately to gently nudge behavior toward a desired, stable equilibrium. The all-seeing network will be presented as the ultimate solution to crime, to terrorism, to inefficiency, to urban chaos. And in many ways, it will deliver. But the price will be the final closure of that brief historical window of privacy, and the creation of a world where every action is recorded, every identity is known, and the very concept of an unwatched moment ceases to exist. If the all-seeing network provides the eyes and ears of the transparent society, then the full digitization of money will provide its memory and its central nervous system. The end of physical cash and the rise of centrally controlled digital currencies will create what can only be described as a perfect, immutable ledger of your life, recording every economic interaction with absolute fidelity. This financial transparency, merged with the torrent of data from the sensor grid, completes the architecture of total societal awareness, transforming not just how we transact, but how our behavior is judged, scored, and ultimately controlled. The journey toward this future begins with the seemingly innocuous decline of cash. For years, we've been moving in this direction, driven by the convenience of credit cards, debit cards, and mobile payment apps. Cash has been increasingly framed as inefficient, inconvenient, and the preferred medium of criminals and tax evaders. The pandemic accelerated this trend dramatically, as fears of virus transmission made contactless payments the default. But the true paradigm shift is the introduction of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Unlike cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, which are decentralized, a CBDC is a direct liability of the central bank. It is the digital equivalent of a dollar bill, issued and controlled by the state. By the late 2020s, many nations, led by China with its digital yuan, will have fully rolled out their CBDCs, with the United States and the European Union following closely behind. On the surface, CBDCs will be marketed as a modernization of the financial system, offering faster, cheaper transactions and greater financial inclusion for those without access to traditional banking. However, their core feature is programmability and traceability. Because every unit of a CBDC exists on a central government ledger, every transaction is recorded. There is no anonymity. The state has a real-time, bird's-eye view of the entire economy, down to the level of an individual's purchase of a cup of coffee. More profoundly, this money can be programmed. The currency itself can have rules embedded within it. For example, stimulus payments could be programmed to expire by a certain date to encourage spending. Funds designated for a specific purpose, like housing or food, could be restricted from being used for anything else. Access to your own money could be instantly frozen if you are suspected of a crime or fail to pay a fine. The end of cash and the rise of CBDCs means the end of true economic privacy. Every single financial decision you make becomes a data point, added to your permanent digital record. This complete financial transparency provides the raw material for the second, more powerful development: the rise of behavioral economics at a societal scale. With a perfect record of every transaction, AI systems can analyze spending patterns with unprecedented granularity. This is no longer about simple marketing, showing you an ad for shoes because you looked at them online. This is about building a deep, predictive model of your character, your values, and your reliability. This analysis will form the basis of a new kind of trust score, a dynamic, algorithmically generated number that represents your value and standing in society. In the West, this won't likely be a single, government-mandated social credit score in the way it is implemented in China. It will be a more decentralized, corporate-led system, but the effect will be largely the same. Your score will be a fusion of multiple data streams. Your financial history from the CBDC ledger will be a core component. Do you pay your bills on time? Do you donate to registered charities? Do you spend money on things deemed socially beneficial, like education and healthy food? Or on things deemed risky, like gambling or excessive alcohol? This financial data will be merged with your social data. Are your online connections considered reputable? Do you spread information that algorithms flag as misinformation? Your score will also incorporate data from the all-seeing network. Do you obey traffic laws? Do you recycle correctly? Have you been geolocated near a political protest? This trust score will become the primary determinant of your life opportunities. It will dictate the interest rate you get on a loan, the insurance premium you pay, and whether you are approved for a mortgage. It will be a key factor in hiring decisions, with AI screening candidates based on their life history of reliability and conformity. It will even determine your access to travel, with low scores potentially restricting your ability to book a flight or cross a border. This system will be presented as the ultimate meritocracy, a fair and objective way to assess risk and reward trustworthiness. But in reality, it creates a powerful incentive for conformity. It creates a chilling effect, where individuals avoid any behavior, transaction, or association that might negatively impact their score. Experimentation, nonconformity, and even righteous dissent become luxuries that few can afford. Tying all of this together is the final piece of the economic puzzle: the fusion of corporate and state data. The traditional line between government surveillance and private data collection will be completely erased. Companies like Palantir, which built its reputation by creating data analysis platforms like Gotham for the CIA and NSA to track terrorists, are now marketing similar systems, such as Foundry, to major corporations and local governments. These platforms are designed to be agnostic about the source of data. They can seamlessly integrate a police department's camera feeds, a bank's CBDC transaction logs, a corporation's customer data, and an individual's social media history into a single unified interface. By 2033, this corporate state data fusion will be the norm. Your identity as a citizen, a consumer, and an employee will no longer be separate. They will be just different facets of a single unified digital profile. A decision made in one domain will have immediate consequences in the others. For example, if you are fired from your job for unreliable behavior flagged by internal monitoring software, this information could instantly lower your trust score, making it harder to get a loan or even a new job. An online political statement could trigger an algorithmic flag that leads to your transactions being subjected to greater scrutiny. The ledger of your life is not just a record. It is a real-time system of behavioral management, a feedback loop where your every action is measured, scored, and used to shape your future opportunities. The world this creates is one of unprecedented economic efficiency and predictability. But it is a world where the freedom to make a mistake, to be financially untidy, or to simply be unobserved in your economic life has vanished completely. The final wall to fall in the transparent society is not in our cities or our bank accounts, but inside our own skulls. The all-seeing network observes our external actions, and the digital ledger records our economic behaviors. But the last sanctuary of privacy has always been the silent, internal world of our own thoughts. By 2033, even this final barrier will have become permeable, not through some magical mind-reading technology, but through the mainstream adoption and mass data analysis of brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. The journey into the glass skull will be voluntary, driven by the profound benefits these technologies offer for health, wellness, and human augmentation. The evolution of BCIs follows a familiar pattern, moving from critical medical applications to desirable consumer gadgets. Today, invasive BCIs are already showing miraculous results. Companies like Synchron, with their StentRoad device, are allowing paralyzed patients to control computers and text messages with their thoughts. The StentRoad is implanted via a blood vessel, avoiding the need for open brain surgery, a key step in reducing the barrier to adoption. On the non-invasive side, advanced electroencephalography, or EEG, headsets are moving from clinical settings into the consumer market as wellness and focus training devices. They can monitor brainwave patterns to help you meditate more effectively or maintain concentration during complex tasks. This is the thin end of the wedge. By the late 2020s, this technology will mature and miniaturize. Imagine soft, flexible, neural lace sensors woven into a comfortable headband or even a baseball cap. Imagine e-tattoos, thin, printable electronic circuits that can be temporarily applied to the skin behind the ear to pick up faint neural signals. These devices will be marketed as the ultimate productivity and wellness tools. They will promise to optimize your brain for peak performance, track your mental fatigue, monitor your sleep quality with unprecedented accuracy, and provide early warnings for neurological conditions like epilepsy or dementia. Companies will offer them to employees to boost focus and prevent burnout. Schools may use them to identify students who are struggling to pay attention. The benefits will be tangible and compelling. The critical turning point comes with the data. Each of these devices, whether invasive or non-invasive, generates an immense stream of raw neural data. Initially, this data is used for a specific purpose, like moving a cursor on a screen or tracking alpha waves for meditation. But this raw data contains infinitely more information than is needed for these simple tasks. This is where the concept of inadvertent thought leakage comes into play. Your brain does not generate a neat, tidy signal for move the cursor left. It generates a complex storm of electrical activity, and within that storm, a machine learning algorithm is trained to recognize the pattern that corresponds with the intention to move the cursor left. However, the algorithm is exposed to the entire storm. It also sees the patterns that correspond to your fleeting emotional states. A flicker of anxiety, a pang of recognition, a subconscious bias toward one image over another. It sees your level of alertness, your cognitive load, even the nascent formation of words and ideas before they are fully verbalized in your conscious mind. At first, this surplus data will be ignored, but the commercial value of understanding a person's unfiltered, pre-conscious reactions is astronomical. An advertiser wouldn't need to ask you if you liked their product. They could measure your brain's involuntary neurological response to it. A political campaign could test a candidate's speech not on a focus group, but by analyzing the raw neural feedback of hundreds of people, identifying which phrases trigger trust and which trigger suspicion at a subconscious level. An entertainment company could shape a movie in real time based on the collective emotional response of the audience. The technology does not read your mind in the science fiction sense of plucking fully formed sentences out of your head. It does something far more subtle and powerful. It performs a statistical analysis of your neural correlates. It doesn't know what you're thinking, but it knows how you're feeling, what you're paying attention to, and what your cognitive and emotional biases are, often before you are consciously aware of them yourself. This creates the ultimate data set for predictive behavioral modeling. Your inner monologue remains your own, but your internal reactions become a quantifiable, marketable, and controllable resource. This trajectory culminates in the vision being pursued by companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink. While the initial public focus of Neuralink is on restoring motor and sensory function to those with neurological disorders, its long-term ambition, as stated by Musk himself, is to create a symbiotic link between the human brain and artificial intelligence. The realistic path from today's prototypes to a widespread consumer product by 2033 involves several key steps. First, the surgical procedure for implantation must become as routine and low risk as something like LASIK eye surgery. Second, the device itself must be miniaturized, wireless, and capable of being charged inductively. Third, and most importantly, there needs to be a killer app, a compelling reason for a healthy person to get the implant. This application will likely be a form of enhanced communication or information access. Imagine being able to access the internet with the speed of thought, to learn a new skill by downloading the information, or to have a silent, telepathic conversation with a friend who also has the implant. By 2033, it is plausible that the first generation of these consumer-grade neural implants will be available, marketed to early adopters as the next great leap in human evolution. For those with the implant, their minds will be networked to the cloud. Their thoughts, or at least the neural data corresponding to their thoughts, will become part of a vast, interconnected data stream. The implications are staggering. It represents the final and complete merger of the human and the digital. The distinction between the self and the network, between the inner world and the outer world, begins to dissolve. The glass skull is the endgame of the surveillance society. It's a world where not only is every action and transaction recorded, but where the very patterns of our consciousness can be monitored, analyzed, and influenced. It will be sold to us as a promise of transcendence, but it will carry the risk of a form of control so total and so subtle that we may not even recognize it as control at all. As the technological architecture of total transparency solidifies, the most profound changes will occur not in our cities or our devices, but within our own minds. Living in a world without privacy precipitates a fundamental shift in human psychology, shaping our behavior, our identity, and even our capacity for original thought. The constant awareness of being watched, scored, and analyzed creates a pervasive psychological pressure that will define the inner life of the generation born into this new reality. The most immediate and well-understood effect is what is known as the panopticon effect, a concept first described by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century and later popularized by Michel Foucault. Bentham's idea was for a prison designed so that a single guard could observe any inmate at any time, without the inmates knowing whether they were being watched at that exact moment. The mere possibility of being observed, Foucault argued, is enough to compel prisoners to regulate their own behavior. They internalize the guard's gaze and become their own jailers. The transparent society of 2033 is a digital planetary scale panopticon. The guard is not a human, but a silent, omnipresent algorithm. We may not know precisely when our data is being actively analyzed, but the certainty that any action, a purchase, a journey, a conversation, a neurological flicker, could be analyzed at any moment forces us into a state of continuous self-censorship. This effect will manifest in subtle but powerful ways. We will become more risk-averse. The fear of making a mistake that could be permanently logged and negatively impact our trust score will discourage experimentation and spontaneity. We might hesitate to click on a controversial news article, to associate with a person who has a low score, or to express an unpopular opinion, even in what we believe to be a private conversation. Creativity and innovation, which often arise from challenging norms and making mistakes, may be stifled in a culture that rewards predictability and conformity above all else. The system's logic favors the safe, the median, the statistically normal. Over time, society as a whole becomes more docile, more predictable, and less dynamic. Beyond simple behavioral modification, this constant performance takes a deeper psychological toll, leading to an erosion of the true self. The sociologist Irving Goffman described social interaction as a form of theater, where we all play various roles and present a carefully managed face to the world. Crucially, Goffman's theory depends on the existence of a backstage, a private space where we can drop the mask, relax, and be our authentic, unedited selves. It is in this backstage space that we process our true emotions, vent our frustrations, and explore unconventional thoughts without fear of judgment. The transparent society effectively eliminates the backstage. When every space is monitored and every interaction is recorded, the performance must be maintained 24/7. Life becomes a single, continuous front stage performance for an algorithmic audience. This creates a profound and exhausting psychological stress. The constant need to project a socially acceptable, algorithmically pleasing identity can lead to a sense of alienation from one's own authentic feelings. If you can never safely express anger, sadness, or doubt without it being logged and potentially penalized, you may eventually learn to suppress those feelings altogether. The gap between the performed self and the true self widens, leading to what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. This can manifest as a rise in anxiety, depression, and a pervasive sense of inauthenticity. We may lose the ability to even know what we truly think or feel, as our internal landscape becomes conditioned to reflect the external demand for positive, compliant, and predictable behavior. Perhaps the most significant psychological shift, however, will be generational. For those of us born in the 20th or early 21st century, the end of privacy will be experienced as a profound loss. We have a memory of a different world, a baseline against which to measure the change. We understand what it feels like to have an unrecorded thought, an unwatched conversation, an anonymous journey. But for the generation born after 2025, a generation that grows up entirely within the transparent society, there will be no sense of loss. This state of constant observation will be their normal, the natural condition of existence. The desire for privacy, as we understand it, may seem to them a strange and even pathological concept. Why would a good person want to hide their actions? What do you have to fear if you have nothing to hide? They will learn from a very young age to curate their digital and physical presence as a single, unified identity. The concept of a separate, private self might be as foreign to them as the concept of communal living is to a modern urbanite. Their psychology will be fundamentally different. They may develop a form of ambient social awareness, an intuitive sense of how their actions are being perceived and scored by the network, much like we have an intuitive sense of social cues in a conversation. They may be more cooperative, more socially cohesive, and less prone to antisocial behavior. The society they build might be safer, more orderly, and more efficient, but it will also be a society where the values of individualism, rebellion, and radical self-discovery, which have been central to Western thought for centuries, may have little room to breathe. The very definition of a healthy mind might change. Today, we might value authenticity and the ability to grapple with difficult, even negative emotions. In the transparent society, a healthy mind might be defined as one that is consistently positive, stable, and predictable, a mind that produces good data. Psychological wellness could become synonymous with algorithmic compliance. This is the ultimate quiet tragedy of the panopticon. It doesn't need to break down the door to control you. It simply creates a world where you are conditioned, from birth, to build the walls of your own. Perfectly transparent, perfectly compliant, inner prison. The human spirit is adaptable, but the question is what it adapts into. The psychological pressures of a transparent society reshape the individual from within, but the ethical landscape of that society is also profoundly altered. When every action, and eventually every intention, is recorded on an incorruptible digital ledger, some of the most fundamental pillars of our current moral and legal systems begin to crumble. Core concepts like forgiveness, dissent, and the presumption of innocence are challenged by a world in which mistakes are forever, and judgment is handed down not by human peers, but by cold, calculating algorithms. The first and most personal casualty in this new world is the concept of forgiveness, which is predicated on the imperfection of memory and the possibility of growth. In our current system, time is a great healer. Youthful mistakes, embarrassing phases, moments of poor judgment, these tend to fade from public memory. We are allowed to learn, to change, and to reinvent ourselves. A past misdeed does not have to be a permanent stain on our character. A permanent, searchable, and algorithmically scored record of our entire lives changes this calculus completely. In the society of 2033, every awkward social media post from your teenage years, every ill-advised purchase, every argument captured by an ambient microphone, every moment of anger detected by a biometric sensor is preserved with perfect fidelity. It becomes a permanent and accessible part of your data profile. This creates what could be called the death of forgiveness. When an AI assesses your trustworthiness for a loan or a job, it will not be programmed to forget. It will weigh that mistake you made at 17 with the same mathematical objectivity as the good deed you did yesterday. The concept of moving on becomes meaningless when the past is always present. This has devastating consequences for personal growth. How can an individual truly recover from addiction if their every relapse is a permanent black mark on their record? How can someone who has served time for a crime ever truly reintegrate into society when their past is an inescapable digital shadow that follows them everywhere? Society may lose its capacity for grace, replaced by a system of relentless, unforgiving, and perpetual judgment. We risk creating a world where no one is allowed to be a work in progress, a world that demands a level of lifelong perfection that no human being can possibly achieve. On a broader societal level, the same technological architecture that erodes personal forgiveness also creates a powerful chilling effect on political dissent and accountability. Whistleblowing, investigative journalism, and organized opposition are the immune system of a healthy democracy. They depend on the ability of individuals to communicate securely, to meet privately, and to expose wrongdoing without immediate fear of retribution. In a world of total surveillance, these activities become nearly impossible. A potential whistleblower at a corporation or a government agency knows that their every digital communication is monitored. Any attempt to access or copy sensitive files would trigger immediate algorithmic alerts. Meeting with a journalist would be a futile exercise in secrecy, as the location data of both individuals would instantly reveal their connection. Anonymity, the shield that protects so many who speak truth to power, is obliterated by default biometric identity. The result is that power becomes unaccountable. It becomes immensely difficult to challenge corruption, to expose abuses, or to organize for political change when the tools of organization and communication are themselves the tools of surveillance. Dissent doesn't need to be made illegal. It is simply made technologically infeasible. The system doesn't need to punish dissidents after the fact. It can identify and neutralize their efforts before they even begin. The very act of questioning authority becomes a detectable anomaly in the data stream, a deviation from the compliant norm that can be flagged and managed. This leads to the most troubling ethical frontier of all, the rise of pre-crime and predictive justice. This is the logical endpoint of a system designed not just to record the past, but to predict the future. As AI systems are fed trillions of data points on human behavior, our movements, our purchases, our social connections, our emotional states, and eventually our neural patterns, they will become increasingly accurate at forecasting what we are likely to do next. The ethical dilemma is profound. If an algorithm calculates with 99% certainty that an individual is about to commit a violent crime, what is the proper response? Do law enforcement agencies intervene before the crime has been committed? This shifts the foundation of our legal system from punishing a wrongful act, actus reus, to punishing a wrongful intent, mens rea. We would be punishing people not for what they have done, but for what a machine predicts they might do. This system is ripe for catastrophic error and bias. The AI's predictions are only as good as the data it is trained on. If that historical data reflects existing societal biases, for example, if certain neighborhoods are policed more heavily, leading to more arrests, the algorithm will learn to associate people from those neighborhoods with a higher probability of criminality. The system will create self-fulfilling prophecies, targeting individuals and communities based on biased data, leading to more interventions, which in turn generates more data to prove the algorithm's original bias. More fundamentally, it violates the presumption of innocence, one of the bedrock principles of modern justice. We would be treating citizens as pre-criminals, constantly monitored and assessed for their potential threat level. Your own thoughts and emotional states, as inferred from your biometric and neural data, could become evidence against you. A spike in anger detected by your smartwatch, combined with your proximity to a political rival, could trigger a pre-crime alert, leading to a police intervention for an act you never even committed. The ethical framework of our civilization was built for a world of imperfect knowledge. It contains room for doubt, for change, for privacy, and for the freedom to be judged on our actions, not our potential. The transparent society, with its promise of perfect knowledge and predictive certainty, dismantles that framework piece by piece, leaving us in a world that is perhaps safer and more orderly, but also profoundly less forgiving, less free, and ultimately less human. The architecture of transparency, once perfected, will not remain confined within national borders. Like all powerful systems of organization, from the Roman aqueduct to the British Railway, its logic and infrastructure will become a major cultural and geopolitical export. The transition to a global social credit system will not be a monolithic, top-down imposition, but rather a complex process of adoption and adaptation, resulting in a world with distinct regional flavors of the same underlying model of algorithmic governance. China's social credit system serves as the pioneering model and the most visible prototype. Launched as a pilot program in the mid-2010s and continually refined since, it is the world's most ambitious attempt to explicitly codify and quantify citizen trustworthiness. The system merges data from a vast array of government and corporate sources: financial records, criminal history, social media behavior, compliance with traffic laws, and even filial piety. This data is used to generate a score that grants rewards, like easier access to loans or fast-track travel permits, and imposes punishments, like being barred from buying plane tickets or having slower internet speeds. For years, the West has viewed this system as a uniquely authoritarian phenomenon, incompatible with democratic values. However, the critical insight for the future is not to see the system as an ideological tool, but as a technology of social management. And like any effective technology, its core principles are now being exported. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, China is building digital infrastructure, 5G networks, smart city systems, data centers across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Along with the hardware comes the software and the operational philosophy. For many developing nations struggling with corruption, weak institutions, and a large informal economy, the appeal of a Chinese-style social credit system is immense. It offers the promise of leapfrogging decades of development to create a high-trust, efficient, and orderly society. It provides a tool for enforcing contracts, collecting taxes, and reducing crime with a ruthless, algorithmic efficiency that human bureaucracies can rarely match. By 2033, we will see dozens of countries particularly those within China's geopolitical orbit, adopting bespoke versions of this model. It will be marketed not as authoritarianism, but as smart governance, digital harmony, or national security. The Western variation on this theme will be subtler, more decentralized, and presented in the language of freedom and consumer choice. But its ultimate effect will be strikingly similar. There will likely be no single, government-mandated federal trust score in the United States or Europe. Instead, a similar system will emerge from the private sector, a consortium of powerful corporations in the tech, finance, and insurance industries. This is a model of privatized social credit. Your score will not be a single number from the government, but a constellation of interoperable ratings from different corporate entities. Amazon will have a purchaser reliability score. Uber will have a passenger respect score. Your insurance company will have a dynamic risk profile score based on real-time data from your car and health wearables. Your bank will have a financial probity score based on your CBDC transaction history. The genius of this Western model is its voluntary nature, at least initially. You are not forced to participate. You are free to not use Amazon, not to take an Uber, not to wear a smartwatch. But the social and economic cost of opting out will become prohibitively high. Life without a good score will be a life of friction and exclusion. You will pay more for everything. You will be denied services, and you will be shut out of the most desirable jobs. This corporate-led system will be justified by the principles of free market capitalism. Companies will argue they have a right to assess the risk of doing business with a customer or employee. The end result is a panopticon that is even more pervasive than the state-led model, because it governs not just your relationship with the government, but your relationship with the entire economic ecosystem. The state is still involved, but as a consumer of data from this corporate grid, rather than its sole proprietor. Government agencies will simply subscribe to the data feeds of these corporate scoring systems to assess eligibility for social services, security clearances, or even visa applications. This creates a tale of two worlds, or more accurately, a spectrum of adaptation based on deep-seated cultural values. Cultures with a strong collectivist tradition, particularly in East Asia, may adapt to this new reality with relative ease. The idea that individual behavior should be aligned with societal harmony is already a core cultural value. In these societies, the social credit system may be perceived as a natural, technological extension of existing social norms, a way to enforce the moral consensus on a mass scale. In contrast, cultures with a strong individualist tradition, like the United States, will experience this transition as a much more contentious and painful process. The rhetoric will always be about individual choice and responsibility, but the underlying pressure to conform will generate significant cultural friction. We will likely see a deep political and social divide between those who embrace the safety and convenience of the scoring system and those who resist it as an intolerable infringement on personal liberty. This could lead to a cultural bifurcation. The mainstream of society will live within the comfortable cage of the algorithmic order, while a counterculture of digital dropouts will attempt to live outside of it, creating a new kind of social and economic class division based on one's relationship to the data grid. European nations may try to chart a middle path, leveraging their tradition of strong data privacy regulations like GDPR, to attempt to build a more ethical or human-centric version of the system. They may legislate for greater transparency in the algorithms and create mechanisms for appeal. However, they will face immense pressure from the inescapable logic of the technology. In a globalized world, a society that unilaterally chooses to be less efficient and less secure by opting out of these systems may find itself at a significant economic and geopolitical disadvantage. The global social credit system, therefore, will not be a uniform gray blanket covering the world, but a complex tapestry woven with different cultural threads, all leading toward a similar destination of pervasive, algorithmic social management. In our exploration of the transparent society, we have focused on the informational and social consequences of a world without privacy. But this vast, planetary-scale system of omniscience has a physical form, a colossal industrial footprint that is rarely considered. The invisible world of data is supported by a very visible world of steel, silicon, and immense energy consumption. The environmental cost of maintaining a real-time, all-seeing network is a hidden variable in the equation of our future, one that carries its own profound challenges and consequences. The most significant environmental impact stems from the voracious energy appetite of the data centers that will serve as the brains of this global network. A single Google data center can already consume as much electricity as a small city. By 2033, the global surveillance grid will require thousands of such hyperscale data centers, running 24/7 to process and analyze the ceaseless torrent of data from trillions of sensors. The AI models used for real-time video analysis, biometric recognition, and predictive analytics are extraordinarily computationally expensive. Training a single large AI model today, like GPT-4, is estimated to consume over 1,000 megawatt-hours of electricity, equivalent to the annual energy consumption of over 100 US homes, and emitting over 500 tons of carbon dioxide. Now, imagine not one training session, but a continuous real-time analysis of the entire global data stream. According to some estimates by researchers like Anders Andre, the information and communications technology industry could consume up to 20% of global electricity by 2030, with data centers being the largest single contributor. A significant portion of this will be dedicated to the computational load of the surveillance economy. This massive energy demand creates a direct conflict with our global goals for climate change mitigation. While the tech industry is a leader in purchasing renewable energy, the sheer scale of this new demand will put unprecedented strain on global power grids. It will necessitate the construction of new power plants, some renewable, but many likely still reliant on fossil fuels, especially in developing nations racing to build out their own surveillance infrastructure. Furthermore, these data centers have an insatiable thirst for water. They use vast quantities for cooling their servers, either through evaporative cooling towers or chiller systems. A typical data center can use millions of gallons of water per day, often in water-scarce regions where land is cheap and accessible. As global surveillance increases, we are effectively trading precious freshwater resources for data processing, creating a new and dangerous front in the global water crisis. The second major environmental cost is the resource extraction required to build the physical hardware of the network. Every camera, every biometric scanner, every neural implant, and every server is a complex assembly of dozens of different minerals and metals. This includes not just common materials like aluminum and copper, but a host of rare earth elements like neodymium, terbium, and dysprosium. that are essential for high-performance magnets, lenses, and microelectronics. The mining of these rare earth metals is an environmentally devastating process. It often involves open-pit mining, which destroys landscapes and ecosystems. The extraction process uses vast amounts of toxic chemicals, such as sulfuric acid, which can leach into groundwater and contaminate local water supplies for generations. The majority of this mining is concentrated in a few countries, like China, creating geopolitical dependencies and often occurring under weak environmental and labor regulations. As we scale up to a world with not just millions, but trillions of sensors, we will need to dramatically increase the rate of this destructive mining. We are effectively tearing apart certain parts of the planet to build the digital infrastructure to watch over the rest of it. This creates a grim paradox. A system designed to create a perfectly orderly and predictable human society is built upon a foundation of ecological chaos and destruction. Finally, there is the escalating problem of electronic waste, or e-waste. The hardware of the surveillance state is not built to last forever. Technological progress is relentless. The 4K cameras of today will be replaced by 16K cameras tomorrow. The processors in today's data centers will be obsolete in a few years. This drives a constant and accelerating cycle of upgrades. This disposable tech cycle generates mountains of e-waste, which is now the fastest growing waste stream in the world. E-waste is incredibly hazardous. It contains heavy metals like lead, mercury, and cadmium, as well as flame retardants and other toxic chemicals. When this waste is not disposed of properly, and a large percentage of it is not, these toxins can contaminate soil and water, posing a severe threat to human health and the environment. Much of this e-waste from developed nations is exported, often illegally, to developing countries in Africa and Asia, where informal workers, including children, dismantle it in hazardous conditions to recover valuable materials. The all-seeing network, therefore, creates a hidden geography of sacrifice zones. There are the zones of extraction, where landscapes are destroyed for rare earth metals. There are the zones of energy and water consumption, where data centers strain local resources. And there are the zones of disposal, where the toxic aftermath of our technological progress is dumped. This environmental dimension reveals that the transparent society is not a weightless, ethereal creation of the digital age. It has a profound physical metabolism. It consumes energy, water, and raw materials at a staggering rate, and it excretes pollution and waste. The pursuit of total information awareness is fundamentally at odds with the principles of environmental sustainability. The perfect, frictionless, and secure world it promises to create for its inhabitants is being paid for with a heavy and often invisible mortgage on the planet's ecological health. The transition into a fully transparent society doesn't just reshape our social and ethical norms. It fundamentally re-engineers the very engine of our economy. The 21st century economy was built on the extraction and monetization of data. The economy of 2033 will be built on the next logical step: the monetization of trust and the direct analysis of human consciousness. In this new economic landscape, your personal data and the trust score it generates will become an asset class more valuable than your financial capital, dictating everything from your employment prospects to the very cost of your existence. This marks the emergence of what can be called the market for trust. The new primary asset class in this economy is your unified data profile. a comprehensive, real-time record of your life, from your financial transactions to your social interactions and biometric data. This profile's value is not just in its raw data, but in the predictive power of the trust score derived from it. This score becomes a form of reputational capital, a dynamic measure of your reliability, conformity, and predictability. Companies, landlords, lenders, and even potential romantic partners will subscribe to services that provide access to these scores, treating them as the ultimate benchmark of a person's worth. This creates a direct economic incentive to live a transparent and compliant life. A high trust score is a tangible financial asset. It unlocks lower insurance premiums, better interest rates, and access to premium services. A low score, conversely, is a debilitating liability, imposing a risk tax on every aspect of your life. Your existence becomes more expensive and more difficult. This system is the ultimate expression of neoliberal logic. Every aspect of human character and behavior is financialized, turned into a quantifiable metric that can be priced, traded, and optimized for maximum economic efficiency. One of the most significant impacts of this new economic model will be on the nature of employment. The traditional hiring process, resumes, interviews, references, will become a relic of a bygone era. It is too slow, too subjective, and too reliant on imperfect information. By 2033, hiring will be largely automated, driven by AI systems that analyze a candidate's entire life history as captured in their data profile. The algorithm will not care about your carefully crafted resume. It will analyze your trust score, your spending habits, your social network, and your behavioral patterns to determine your suitability for a role. The ideal employee in this system is not necessarily the most creative, the most innovative, or the most experienced. The ideal employee is the most predictable. The AI will favor candidates whose data suggests a high degree of conformity, reliability, and emotional stability. It will look for patterns of consistent, risk-averse behavior. Someone who has always paid their bills on time, maintains a stable and moderate social circle, and consumes media that aligns with mainstream norms will be algorithmically flagged as a low-risk, high-value employee. Conversely, a candidate with a history of unconventional purchases, association with low-scored individuals, or a tendency to travel to unstable locations might be flagged as a high-risk hire, regardless of their qualifications. This predictive hiring will create a workforce that is incredibly efficient and stable, but also deeply conformist. It will systematically filter out the iconoclasts, the dissenters, and the nonconformists who are often the very source of disruptive innovation. The path to a successful career will no longer be about acquiring skills, but about meticulously curating a lifetime of clean data. The final frontier of this new economy is the monetization of our inner world. As brain-computer interfaces become more common, they will generate the most valuable data set of all: aggregated neural data. While regulations may initially prevent the sale of an individual's specific thought stream, the business models will focus on selling access to anonymized, aggregated neurological responses. This creates a market for our inner monologue. Imagine a corporation wanting to design a new product. Instead of using clumsy focus groups, they could purchase access to the collective neural data of a target demographic. They could show prototypes to a sample group and measure their subconscious, pre-verbal neurological reactions. The flicker of desire, the surge of cognitive ease, the subtle spike of aversion. This would allow them to engineer products that are perfectly optimized to trigger the desired response in the human brain, bypassing rational thought entirely. The same model would apply to entertainment, politics, and urban planning. Movies could be edited frame by frame based on the real-time emotional and attentional feedback of a test audience. Political speeches could be crafted to maximize neurological resonance and minimize cognitive dissonance. Even the layout of a supermarket or the design of a public park could be optimized based on the aggregated neural data of the people who use the space, creating environments that subtly nudge behavior in a desired direction. This is the ultimate form of behavioral economics. It moves beyond predicting behavior based on past actions to engineering behavior based on direct analysis of its neurological precursors. The economy of 2033 will have successfully commodified the last private space. It will have found a way to extract value not just from what we do and what we say, but from the very patterns of our consciousness. The line between serving a consumer and manipulating a subject will be completely erased. We will be living in an economic environment that is perfectly and seamlessly responsive to our deepest desires, but it will be an environment that is also constantly and invisibly shaping those desires to serve its own ends. The market for trust, predictive hiring, and the monetization of consciousness are not separate trends. They are three pillars of a single, integrated economic system, a system that achieves unprecedented efficiency by turning the entirety of the human experience into a calculable, predictable, and monetizable asset. Even in a world of seemingly total surveillance, the human impulse for freedom, privacy, and rebellion does not simply vanish, it adapts. The more monolithic and controlling a system becomes, the more creative and sophisticated the methods of resistance grow. The transparent society of 2033 will not be a perfectly frictionless machine. It will be a contested landscape, a perpetual, low-level conflict between the all-seeing network and a new resistance that has learned to fight in the shadows of the digital panopticon. This resistance will not take the form of grand, open rebellion. Such a strategy would be suicidal in a world of biometric identification and predictive policing. Instead, it will be a subtle, decentralized, and technologically savvy insurgency fought on the battlefield of data itself. The primary tactic of this new resistance will be data obfuscation, the art of becoming a digital ghost. This is not about erasing one's data, which is impossible, but about polluting it, creating so much noise and misdirection that the signal of one's true actions is lost. Practitioners of this art will use sophisticated software, the next evolution of today's VPNs and TOR browsers, to create multiple, contradictory digital identities. They might use generative adversarial networks, GANs, to create realistic but fake biometric data, such as facial images or voice prints, to fool automated systems. They might employ data poisoning techniques, deliberately feeding false information into the system to degrade the accuracy of the algorithms that score them. Imagine a program that runs constantly in the background of your devices, making thousands of random, nonsensical online searches, liking contradictory political pages, and simulating GPS tracks to places you've never been. This creates a hall of mirrors effect, making it difficult for the AI to build a coherent or predictive model of your behavior. Another tactic will be the use of steganography, hiding messages within seemingly innocuous files. A dissident message could could be encoded in the pixel data of a family photo or the audio frequencies of a pop song, making it invisible to all but those who know how to look for it. This is a quiet, cryptographic rebellion, a constant battle of wits between the surveillance algorithms and the obfuscation tools of the resistance. A second, more extreme form of resistance will be the rise of modern Luddite movements and the establishment of off-grid communities. These will be small, intentional enclaves that make a conscious and collective decision to disconnect from the global network. They will reject digital currency, biometric identification, and network devices. Life in these communities will be a return to analog existence. They will use cash or barter for trade, rely on face-to-face communication, and value practical physical skills over digital literacy. These communities will not be primitive utopias. They will face immense challenges. By cutting themselves off from the global economy, they will sacrifice the conveniences and opportunities of the mainstream world. They will be viewed with suspicion by the authorities, likely labeled as potential havens for criminals and terrorists, and subject to intense external surveillance from drones and satellites, even if their internal world is opaque. They will represent a new kind of frontier, a place for those who value privacy and autonomy above all else. They will be the living proof that an alternative way of life is possible, even if it comes at a great cost. These communities will become the cultural reservoirs of the pre-transparent world, places where the concepts of privacy, anonymity, and unrecorded thought are preserved like endangered species. The final and perhaps most widespread form of resistance will be the most human of all, the art of plausible deniability. In a system that monitors every explicit word, communication will go underground, relying on irony, metaphor, innuendo, and shared cultural context, all things that algorithms struggle to interpret correctly. This is a tactic that has been used by oppressed people throughout history. In the old Soviet Union, it was the art of the anecdote, the political joke that could convey a powerful critique in a form that was deniable as just a joke. In the transparent society, this art form will flourish in the digital realm. Memes, a form of communication that is already highly contextual and resistant to simple interpretation, will become a primary vehicle for dissent. People will develop coded languages and slang that are opaque to the AI's natural language processing models. A seemingly innocent conversation about a popular TV show could, for those in the know, be a detailed discussion about a planned protest. This form of resistance acknowledges that the system is listening, but plays with the gap between data and meaning. The system can record the words, but it can't always grasp the true intent. It's a way of hiding in plain sight, using the very complexity and subtlety of human language as a shield. These three forms of resistance, technical obfuscation, physical withdrawal, and cultural subversion, will not overthrow the system. They are not a revolution in the traditional sense, but they are crucial for the preservation of the human spirit. They create cracks and fissures in the smooth, monolithic surface of the transparent society. They provide breathing room, spaces where alternative ideas can be nurtured and where the human need for an unobserved self can find expression. The new resistance is a reminder that no system of control is ever total. The more pressure is applied, the more humanity finds new and ingenious ways to slip through the net. The future will not be a simple choice, between total transparency and total freedom, but a dynamic, ongoing struggle between the forces of control and the irrepressible, adaptive creativity of those who refuse to be fully known. As the transparent society becomes a technical and social reality, our systems of governance and law find themselves in a state of perpetual crisis. The legal frameworks and ethical principles that have guided liberal democracies for centuries were designed for a world of physical boundaries, imperfect information, and private spaces. Confronted with a reality of total information awareness and brain-computer interfaces, these old frameworks begin to buckle and break, forcing a radical and contentious debate about how to govern a society where the traditional lines between public and private action and thought have been erased. The first major battleground in this new legal landscape will be the redefinition of fundamental human rights. The concept of a right to privacy, enshrined in documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, becomes almost meaningless in a world where privacy is a technical impossibility. The debate will therefore shift to a new, more relevant set of rights. Legal scholars and activists will begin to champion the idea of cognitive liberty, the right to control one's own mental processes and to be free from unwanted mental intrusion. This includes the right to mental privacy, which asserts that an individual's neural data is sacrosanct and cannot be collected or analyzed without their explicit and informed consent. It also includes the right to self-determination, the right to be free from algorithmic or neurological manipulation designed to alter one's thoughts, preferences, or personality against one's will. This debate will be fierce. On one side, proponents of cognitive liberty will argue that without these protections, the very essence of individual autonomy and free will is at risk. On the other side, governments and corporations will argue that neural data, when anonymized and aggregated, is a vital resource for public health, national security, and economic progress. They will make the case that monitoring neural data can provide early warnings for diseases like Alzheimer's, prevent terrorist attacks by identifying patterns of radicalization, and create a more efficient and responsive economy. The legal battles over cognitive liberty will be the defining constitutional struggles of the 2030s. Compounding this problem is the chronic and seemingly unsolvable issue of legal lag. The speed of technological development now vastly outpaces the speed of the legislative process. By the time a law is debated, drafted, and passed to regulate a specific technology, that technology has often already been superseded by something new and even more disruptive. The legal system is constantly fighting yesterday's battles. For example, while lawmakers are still struggling to create a regulatory framework for facial recognition, companies are already moving on to gait analysis, voice biometrics, and thermal imaging. While courts are trying to determine the legal status of data collected from a non-invasive EEG headset, companies like Neuralink are preparing for a world of direct neural implants. This creates a perpetual state of regulatory ambiguity, a gray zone in which innovators operate largely unchecked. Tech companies will adopt a strategy of permissionless innovation, deploying new technologies into the market and allowing them to become deeply embedded in society before regulators have a chance to react. Once a technology is widely adopted and integrated into the economy, as mobile payments and social media are today, it becomes incredibly difficult to regulate it meaningfully, let alone ban it. the regulators are always several steps behind, trying to put the genie back in the bottle long after it has reshaped the world. This leads to the most fundamental and perhaps intractable problem of governance in the transparent society. Who watches the watchers? When the tools of social management are not human police officers or bureaucrats, but opaque, complex, and constantly evolving AI systems, how can we ensure accountability? A human police officer can be cross-examined in court. A government agency is subject to freedom of information laws. But how do you hold an algorithm accountable? The concept of algorithmic transparency is often proposed as a solution. The idea is that the code and the data used by these AI systems should be open to public scrutiny. However, this is often technically and commercially unfeasible. The AI models used for social credit scoring or predictive policing are among the most valuable intellectual property a company or government possesses. Furthermore, their complexity is so immense that even their own creators often cannot fully explain why the model made a specific decision, a phenomenon known as the black box problem. When an individual is denied a loan or flagged as a security risk by an AI, they may have no way of knowing the precise reason for the decision. The system's logic is hidden within a black box of trillions of calculations. This creates a new kind of power, a power that is diffuse, anonymous, and unaccountable. There is no single human tyrant to overthrow, no specific office to hold responsible. The Watcher is a distributed network, a self-regulating system of control with no central point of failure and no clear mechanism for appeal. Governing this new world will require a paradigm shift in our approach to law and regulation. We may need to move away from reactive, rule-based legislation toward more adaptive, principle-based systems. We might need to create new regulatory bodies, staffed not just with lawyers, but with data scientists and ethicists who can audit algorithms in real time. We may need to establish a legal principle of algorithmic due process, which would grant individuals the right to a clear and understandable explanation for any significant decision made about them by an AI. But even these solutions are partial at best. They are an attempt to impose an old model of human-centric governance onto a new reality of machine-driven social management. The ultimate challenge is that the very tools we would need to regulate the system, powerful AI, vast data analysis, are the same tools that make up the system itself. We are faced with the daunting task of trying to build a cage for a creature that is made of the very same material as the bars. As we trace these converging technological and social vectors toward 2033, it becomes clear that we are not heading toward a single, predetermined future. Rather, we are navigating toward a spectrum of possibilities. The technologies of transparency are tools, and like any tool, they can be used to build different kinds of structures. To understand the choices before us, let's explore two divergent scenarios, two potential worlds that could emerge from the end of privacy. The first, and perhaps the most likely outcome, is what we can call the comfortable cage. This is not a dark, oppressive dystopia in the style of Orwell's 1984. It is a much softer, subtler, and more seductive future, one that aligns more closely with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. In the comfortable cage, society has, by and large, willingly and even enthusiastically accepted total transparency. The trade-off has been made consciously. The messy, unpredictable, and often dangerous freedoms of the past have been exchanged for an unprecedented level of safety, convenience, and personalized services. Life in this world is seamless. Crime has plummeted to near zero levels because the certainty of being identified and caught makes most criminal acts irrational. Public health is managed with incredible efficiency, as real-time biometric data allows for the instant detection of disease outbreaks and the prediction of individual health crises before they occur. The economy is perfectly stable and hyper-efficient, with resources allocated based on flawlessly predictive models of supply and demand. Your personal AI assistant knows you better than you know yourself. It curates your news, suggests your entertainment, plans your meals, and manages your schedule, all perfectly optimized for your health, happiness, and productivity. There are no traffic jams because the smart city grid manages the flow of autonomous vehicles with perfect precision. There is no financial uncertainty because your trust score guarantees you access to the resources you need, as long as you remain a productive and compliant member of society. It is a world without friction. In this scenario, the very concept of privacy has been pathologized. The desire to hide one's actions or thoughts is not seen as a right, but as a symptom of antisocial or even criminal intent. Why would you need privacy unless you have something to hide? Becomes the unanswerable, common-sense question of the era. Children are raised in this environment and learn to see the constant data collection not as surveillance, but as a form of care. The system is watching over them, keeping them safe, helping them to become their best selves. The idea of an unrecorded conversation or an anonymous journey would seem as strange and reckless to them as driving without a seatbelt seems to us today. Dissent still exists, but it is not violently suppressed. It is managed. Individuals who express radical or destabilizing ideas are not imprisoned. They are gently nudged back toward the mainstream. Their trust scores might be subtly lowered, limiting their access to certain platforms or opportunities. Their information feeds might be algorithmically adjusted to expose them to more calming, consensus-building content. They are not silenced, but their voices are rendered ineffective, lost in a perfectly optimized sea of personalized, agreeable information. The psychological stress of the performance self is mitigated by a new generation of pharmaceuticals and neurotechnologies designed to promote emotional stability and contentment. Anxiety and existential dread are treated as medical problems, solvable with a targeted intervention. The people in the comfortable cage are not unhappy. By most metrics, they are healthier, safer, and more materially comfortable than any generation in human history. They do not feel oppressed. They feel cared for. They do not feel controlled. They feel guided. Yet something profound has been lost. The capacity for true individuality, which is forged in the private space of unobserved struggle and unconventional thought, has atrophied. The serendipity of unexpected encounters and the thrill of genuine discovery are replaced by a life of perfect prediction and optimization. Human experience, once a wild and unpredictable journey, becomes a guided tour through a perfectly curated theme park. The cage is comfortable, the bars are nearly invisible, and the door is, in theory, unlocked. But few, if any, ever feel the desire to leave. Life is simply too good inside. This scenario is not a warning about a hostile, external force taking over our lives. It is a warning about the power of our own desire for comfort, safety, and ease. The comfortable cage is a world we might build for ourselves, not with jackboots and barbed wire, but with seamless user interfaces, personalized recommendations, and the relentless, seductive logic of optimization. It is a utopia that costs us our soul, and the price is paid so gradually and with such obvious benefits that we may not realize what we have lost until it is gone forever. The comfortable cage is a plausible future, but it is not the only one. The forces of control and the human spirit of resistance may not resolve into a stable, placid equilibrium. Instead, they could lead to a second, more dynamic and volatile scenario, the fractured panopticon. This is a world defined not by seamless consensus, but by a permanent, low-level conflict between zones of total transparency and enclaves of determined opacity. It is a future where privacy is not extinct, but has become a rare and contested commodity, creating a new and profound form of social and economic stratification. In this scenario, the global push for total transparency is not entirely successful. A combination of cultural resistance, political fragmentation, and the sheer technical difficulty of imposing a single system on a complex world leads to a fractured and uneven implementation of the surveillance grid. While major urban centers and developed nations may move toward the model of the comfortable cage, vast areas of the world, and even pockets within those developed nations, will remain stubbornly opaque. This leads to the emergence of what analysts will call opaque zones, or data havens. These could be entire regions in countries with weak central governments, or they could be marginalized urban districts where the infrastructure of surveillance is actively sabotaged. These zones will become the modern-day equivalent of the pirate havens of the 18th century. They will be places where the all-seeing network is actively blocked or scrambled by sophisticated counter-surveillance technology. Within these zones, anonymity is once again possible. Cash or untraceable cryptocurrencies are the dominant medium of exchange. Digital ghosts and off-grid rebels will flock to these areas, creating a vibrant, chaotic, and often dangerous subculture. These opaque zones will be magnets for both creativity and criminality. They will be the only places where true dissent, radical innovation, and unconventional art can flourish without algorithmic oversight. But they will also be havens for organized crime, terrorism, and black markets. The outside world will view these zones with a mixture of fear and fascination, much as the settled world once viewed the untamed frontier. They will be cordoned off, their inhabitants unable to easily re-enter the transparent world without passing through intense biometric and data screening checkpoints. Life inside the zone is free but precarious. Life outside is safe but constrained. A new and powerful class divide will emerge, one based not on wealth in the traditional sense, but on access to privacy. In the fractured panopticon, privacy is not a right. It is the ultimate luxury good. The ultra-wealthy will not live in the same transparent world as the masses. They will use their immense resources to purchase technological and legal shields that create a bubble of opacity around their lives. They will employ teams of data scientists to engage in sophisticated obfuscation, creating layers of false digital identities. They will live in exclusive, physically secured compounds equipped with military-grade counter-surveillance technology that jams drones and blocks satellite imaging. They will use their political influence to carve out legal exemptions for themselves, arguing that their high-stakes financial and political activities require a level of confidentiality that is not afforded to the general public. Their children will attend elite schools where the use of monitoring technology is strictly forbidden, allowing them to develop their minds free from the pressures of the performance self. For this new elite, privacy becomes the ultimate status symbol. The ability to have an unrecorded conversation or to make an untraceable transaction is a mark of power. Meanwhile, the middle and lower classes will live in a state of total transparency. Their lives are an open book. Their data, the raw material that powers the economy that the elite controls. Their trust scores dictate their every opportunity, locking them into a predictable and manageable existence. This creates a two-tiered society that is more deeply divided than any class system of the past. It's not just a gap in wealth, but a gap in the very nature of human experience. The masses live predictable, data-driven lives within the comfortable cage, while the elite retain the freedom, spontaneity, and autonomy that comes with privacy. This world is inherently unstable. The border between the transparent and opaque zones will be a constant source of conflict. The transparent world will see the opaque zones as a source of contagion, of crime, of disorder, of dangerous ideas, and will be constantly seeking to penetrate and control them. The opaque zones, in turn, will be launching their own digital and physical attacks against the surveillance grid, seeking to create new cracks in the system. The class divide will breed deep resentment. The masses, conditioned to believe that privacy is a sign of wrongdoing, will view the elite's opacity with suspicion and anger. Populist movements may rise, demanding an end to privacy privilege and calling for the same rules of transparency to be applied to everyone. The fractured panopticon is a world of perpetual tension. It avoids the homogeneous conformity of the comfortable cage, but at the cost of stability and equality. It is a world of stark contrasts, of hyper-ordered smart cities and chaotic autonomous zones, of a data-logged populace and a private, untouchable elite. It is a future where humanity has not made a collective decision about the value of privacy, but has instead allowed that decision to become another battlefield in the timeless struggle for power, freedom, and control. It is a world that is perhaps more recognizably human in its messiness and conflict, but it is also a world teetering on the edge of a new kind of digital feudalism. As our journey through the landscape of tomorrow comes to a close, it becomes clear that the end of privacy is not a single, inevitable event. It is not a destination we will suddenly arrive at in the year 2033. Rather, it is a process, a fundamental transformation in the relationship between the individual and the collective, between our inner world and the external world. We are not being carried helplessly by a technological current toward one unavoidable fate. Instead, we are the architects of the future we will inhabit, and the choices we make today are laying the foundation for the divergent paths that lie ahead, from the seamless order of the comfortable cage to the volatile inequality of the fractured panopticon. These scenarios are not predictions, but cautionary tales, thought experiments designed to illuminate the stakes of our present moment. The reality we will create will likely be a complex and messy blend of both, with different cultures and communities forging their own unique compromises between freedom and security, privacy and convenience. The technologies we have discussed, the all-seeing network, the digital ledger, the brain-computer interface, are not inherently good or evil. They are amplifiers of human intent. They possess the capacity to create a world of unprecedented safety, health, and efficiency. but they also hold the potential for a form of control so total and so subtle that it could suffocate the very essence of what makes us human. The adaptability of the human spirit is the great unknown variable in this equation. History teaches us that we have always reshaped ourselves and our societies in response to transformative new technologies. The invention of the printing press did not just make books cheaper. It rewired the European mind, paving the way for the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and the rise of the individual. The internet did not just give us a new way to communicate, it dissolved the boundaries of time and space, creating a new form of global consciousness. In the same way, the technologies of transparency will do more than just record our lives. They will change the very nature of what it means to be a self. The central question, therefore, is not whether privacy will end, but what new definition of self will emerge from a world without secrets. When our external actions and our internal states are part of a continuous, interconnected data stream, where does the individual begin and the network end? If our thoughts and preferences are constantly being shaped by predictive algorithms that know us better than we know ourselves, what becomes of free will? If our sense of identity is built not in the private sanctuary of the mind, but in the constant performance of a public persona, what happens to authenticity? These are not questions with easy answers. They are the profound philosophical challenges that will define the human experience in the 21st century. We are walking into this new world with a set of ethical and psychological tools forged in a previous era, an era of walls and boundaries that is rapidly dissolving. We may find that our old concepts of identity, freedom, and consciousness are no longer adequate to describe the reality we are creating. Perhaps a new kind of human will emerge, a networked self that experiences its identity as a fluid and collective phenomenon. Perhaps we will find a new equilibrium, a new social contract that allows us to reap the benefits of these powerful technologies while preserving the sacred spaces necessary for a flourishing inner life. Or perhaps we will lose something precious and irreplaceable in the transition. The future is not yet written. The path to 2033 is paved with countless small decisions we will all make in the coming years. The apps we choose to install, the devices we bring into our homes, the conveniences we are willing to trade for our data, and the principles we are willing to defend. We are living through the quiet, almost imperceptible closing of a brief historical parenthesis of privacy. The challenge for us, the last generation, to remember what came before, is to decide not what we want to prevent, but what we value enough to carry with us into the transparent world of tomorrow.